mycket populär.
I'm pushing you and you're getting it. It's really flowing much faster. And the piece has so much room for this rhythmic flow, coming and going and not the exactness. I think maybe as guitarists we tended to, or our teachers or whoever, reacted against Segovia, etc. and those lot who rhythmically did pretty way out things. And then there was this next generation of people who sort of like bang, 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 everything exactly its time. And many of us are stuck with this, and it takes us quite a lot of time really to get the distinction between what being very musical is or what being out of rhythm is. And there's an in-between thing. The thing that you just did there just now, I think it was great because it was out of rhythm, but everybody was tapping their foot with you, in the sense that is convincing, so that I never felt that you did something wrong. Yeah. Okay, next half.
And then when you were only 16 years old, you attended the Royal
Academy
yeah. of Music in London.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that period?
Yes, that was a strange period because I wanted to study music seriously, and a friend of our family, who's a French horn player, suggested that I do it because he thought I was good enough and so on. So when I went to London, to be honest, I was completely ignorant. I knew nothing about harmony really, and I was very bad at sight reading. So my exam was kind of strange exam in that they took me in just because they thought I played well enough. The rest of it, I was a disaster. Also at that time, they accepted very few guitarists, so I also did an exam on the French horn, and hoping to get in. If I couldn't get in as a guitarist, I would get in as a French hornist. So when I was accepted as a two, I dropped the French horn straight away and said, okay, I'm a guitarist. And that was it.
But you played the French horn also?
Yeah. And then I left the French horn and played the violin after that for a few years. Well, guitarists are often a little bit isolated. We don't get to play in the orchestras. We get very little experience in chamber music, especially at the beginning, and not that much contact with other musicians. So by playing the violin badly, but good enough to play in the odd little quartet and good enough to play in the bad local orchestras, etc., I gained a certain kind of experience that I wouldn't have got. And also I made many, many friends through it. So in that sense, it was worth it. Guilt got into it.
Det var faktiskt inte första gången jag träffade honom. Jag har träffat honom, han var på musikskolan för 2,5 år sedan tror jag. Och det är ju, han är enormt bra. Det går inte att säga hur bra han är, men det är faktiskt, det ger en kick på alla möjliga sätt. Dels få höra honom spela och samtidigt som en pedagog så är han otroligt lugn och konkret, och han tar verkligen hänsyn till eleven på alla nivåer. Han kan anpassa sig hur som helst, verkligen. Det är jättebra.
Jakob, var du nervös första gången du satte dig med gitarren i knät här uppe?
Spela för honom? Ja, det var jag faktiskt. Det är lite läskigt att spela för. Man vet liksom att det är bara gitarrister som sitter och lyssnar och alla är bra på att spela. Då var jag ganska nervös. Mer nervös än när jag spelar konserter.
Men man märker kanske ganska snabbt att alla är vänner och sådär.
Ja.
Det släpper väl efter?
Jo då. Ja. Idag gick det väldigt bra.
What is your approach to guitar technique?
My approach. One of the things that I feel that perhaps we've all suffered from, the guitarists all have a certain amount of self-taught feeling about them. They're all partly because we tend to isolate ourselves, we play mostly solo repertoire, And a lot of players have learned their technique through simply playing pieces. And they simply struggle through pieces that are always far too difficult for them because they enjoy playing it and so on. So I try to isolate the technique as much as possible, and we've been sitting for the first hour in the class just doing warm-up exercises, simple studies, but not even studies in terms of pieces, just simple, very, very simple, you know, little stuff like that, which is, it's simply to get the mechanical parts working. So hopefully, if in theory, if all your mechanics worked well, when you get round to playing a piece of music, that piece of music is no longer like an obstacle course. Yes. Technically, in theory, you should have everything resolved, and then you're going to play it much better. Of course, that's utopia. You still have to practice the piece. The other thing is, I think there's an element of instrument playing which is almost like a sport. It's there's no art in this part. This is purely getting the fingers to work. It's like putting the ball in the basket. Once you can do that, then it's much easier to approach all the art of music without all the trauma of the technique study. So that would be my approach to technique, if you like. Then as far as details go, left hand, I think, in most guitarists is fairly similar, of most of the good players. There are a few different schools of thought, if you like, but most of the disagreements across the world have to do with the right hand and how you strike the string, whether you play this angle, that angle, whatever. I find that I like to look at this. You look at how do you scratch your belly, how do you pick your nose. You know, there's a certain mechanical structure to the hand, and a lot of the older way of playing had to do with bending the wrist and quite a high wrist. If I do that, I'm not comfortable in terms of it's not mechanically optimum. Whereas if your wrist can go from here to here, the best place is in the middle. The finger goes from there to there, the best place is in the middle. And more or less all around your body, that's the way it works. If anything is at its limit, it's not a good idea. So the players, for example, who play with this at its limit, you know, I'm sure you've seen bad players go, you know, this sort of stuff. It's going to be much more difficult than the player who uses the finger more or less in the middle of its two limits. So that's something that I try and develop. One of the details, I use probably more angle than most players, although there are many now who play with quite a lot of angle. The reason being that it's easier to achieve a rounder sound. Out here you might not hear it very well, but when you play it like that, it works the box very well, because the string is vibrating downwards first. Whereas when you play like this, you get a more twangy, brittle sound, because when the strings start off vibrating parallel to the box can't start vibrating. It vibrates indirectly by the harmonics rather than by the actual physical action of that one. So that's one of the reasons I work at getting a rounder sound rather than that. Of course, there are times that we also need the thinner one. So that is done mostly with the angle of the wrist, also with the way you shape your nails, etc. That way, it wasn't as bad as that. Good again. Nice, nice. Nice, okay. It's beginning to get there, okay? Where's a pencil? I just want to mark that in, so we do that. Can you just do the last one for me, this? Try this. How's your callus? You know, when you put this finger down here, on the C, instead of putting it there, put it on the softer bit. Because, you know, if I put it on the callus, actually I don't have too much of me wearing it out here, but if I move on the callus, you always get that. If you move it on the flat bit, you don't. So you put it. That's better. That's right. So, yeah, that's no problem. Okay, can we just deal with this bit a little bit more? Yeah. whether it's exactly the same ones as I do, I don't mind. You know, I'm not sure because some of them I was doing slightly different. But what you're doing, if it's convincing enough like that, is great. You know, everyone feels comfortable. Let's go.
Han spelar ju så bra. Samtidigt så märker man att han är en människa på något sätt. Han är en maskin och han kan vara nervös och han har gått igenom det där själv också. Så det känns skönt att höra.
Mm. How do you practice in order to get the most out of your time?
Well, we're chatting it me out. There's a few of the things I try to do. I think there's a difference between learning something new, learning a new piece or learning a new movement in a small action or something, and then playing it out for people. So I think in the terms of putting in information to myself, in which case I'm very self-critical of everything I do, and I check up, make sure I'm doing it right. And then the other half of the practice is, okay, now I'm going to play the piece for you. And I try to think forward in the piece. I don't care what I've done, whether it's good or bad. What's important is what I'm about to do. And in which case I have to be thinking forward, I have to be very unself-critical, because there's no point in thinking about what I've just done wrong. It's what I'm about to do. Keep the mind in front. So I try to practice the two things almost separately. Because I think I made the same mistake, and many students do, of really mixing the two where you simply play it through. And when you're at home, you just kind of enjoy your playing and you're completely unself-critical. And then you go and play your concert, and all you can think about is everything that you've done wrong. Whereas it should be the other way around.
Yes.
Once you're sitting on the concert, you should simply be enjoying it and thinking about what's coming and keep the mind in front. So I try to separate those two things.
you're making concerts all around the world, but what makes you nervous when you walk on stage?
Well, everything. I think the worst thing is probably not feeling secure about your memory. You know, I play mostly by memory. And memory is really... I don't mind if I make a few mistakes, you know, because that's going to happen anyway. And it's not... If I can keep the musical flow, it's not going to disturb the audience's enjoyment of the piece. Whereas if I go into a black hole and have to stop, that would frighten me, it would frighten the audience, you know, it would ruin the whole atmosphere. So that is one of the things that makes me nervous. So I spend a lot of time preparing my memory, working on mental memory. You know, I like to be able to play through a piece completely in my mind and not only have the mechanical memory. I'm sure all of you who've played instruments know that feeling that you can play the piece, you reach the end, you've forgotten, you don't even realize that you've gone right through it, or you can play something and you're talking, your fingers do it. That's mechanical memory, which is very good, it's necessary, but it's very dangerous because you might be thinking about breakfast while you're having it, and then someone coughs in the audience, your mind goes there and your fingers are shot, you know, and you don't even know where you are in the piece. So the mental memory is really important. It's a good trick. You learn a piece, you go, for example, this. And then you go, okay. You know, and then you do it here, you play it on your hand. You know, you're able to play the piece without the instrument and then hopefully do it completely in your mind. I do most of my pieces like that. I go through that process to try to solidify my memory, which makes me feel less nervous. There's another thing, you know, there are some musicians who take Enderol and things like that. They're beta blockers. Yes. I've never done it, and I want to do it at some point only so that when I talk about it, I have personal experience when I'm talking about it to students. But to be honest, I don't really want to do that because in some ways it would take away all the challenge, or not all the challenge, but it would be one challenge less in life. You know, in some ways, if we're talking about golf, golf is my new passion. So, and I love the challenge of trying to beat my own score. You know, I used to play tennis all the time, and I love the challenge of trying to cream the other guy. You know, there are certain, you know, those are, if you get rid of all your challenges, well, losing half the excitement in life. So the challenge of being able to walk on stage and beating my own problems, you know, and overcoming my own problems is something that keeps me going, something that keeps me practicing, it keeps me excited about the instrument.
Mm.